So this is where we are. And you got now Scott Bessent throws a whole different one, a whole nother thing out there. Hey, whoa. We're just bringing them in for a couple of years to train. So it's going to be specific industries where we're actually lacking just the craftsmen. They're going to trade. And I don't think, and people in Georgia got to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not so sure the battery situation in Georgia was just bringing in the best guys to train people and then they're going to go home. My understanding, and maybe my facts are wrong, but I don't think so. My understanding was local folks in Georgia notified people because the poor South Koreans were living, I don't know, 10 to a room, like they want the HB1B guys. I don't think they had the official visas. And they may have been training guys, but I don't think the program was like, hey, they're just here to help us and train us, and then they're leaving. I think they were here as indentured servants because that's what the H1B program is, indentured servitude to basically compete against Americans, take jobs at lower wages and probably less benefits.
H-1B was signed into law by Republican George Bush in 1990. These two graphs both begin in 1990. Since 1990, Americans have been getting replaced and forced into unemployment welfare in favor of low IQ slave labor and forced out of the housing market. We the people demand mass deportations. The upper chart is percentage of 30-year-olds, American 30-year-olds, who both are married and homeowners. We looked at this in the morning show. Over 50%. I misspoke. So that's 1950 there. 1990 is about the middle of the chart when things really go down fast. That inflection point right in the middle. A bit over 50% in 1950, and of course down to, 5 or 10% today. That's not good. And the big plummet is when H-1B program was started. Here, the red line, I guess, is the H-1B. Cumulative total foreign-born white-collar workers in the U.S. I don't know why we need this. Why do we need all these foreigners in America? I don't get it. Patrick Casey writes, whenever messaging like this appears, like Trump's comments on H-1B on the Laura Ingraham show, pushback is justified. The Trump administration's only actions on the H-1B program have been to make it harder to get one. I'd like to see more of that, but ideally I'd like to see the program gutted entirely. With that said, and while this was undeniably a communications disaster, it's clear that Trump's confused. He's not talking about H-1Bs. He's talking about a very specific instance in which Hyundai invested $13 billion in a battery factory in Georgia, brought in hundreds of workers who had the specific expertise necessary to train American workers. I think there's a lot of truth to this. I think this is what happened with Elon Musk as well. I think there's a small subset of H-1Bs that consist of genuine expertise. I think the H-1Bs that Elon is encountering are not washing hotel sheets in the hotel hot tub. I think they're not midwits from India. I think they probably all are world-class talent. Just like everyone Elon interacts with tends to be world-class talent. And so he equates H-1B with that world-class talent without realizing that that's like 1% of H-1Bs. The other 99% are just Indian midwits. That might be true of Trump here too, that contextualization. Continuing here, the Trump administration ended the border crisis virtually overnight and managed to secure the biggest increase in immigration enforcement funding in U.S. history. Hundreds of thousands have been deported, estimated 2 million self-deports, and the first crop of new ICE agents haven't even been deployed yet. Thanks to these efforts, the foreign-born population in America decreased this year for the first time since the 1960s. Still, much more needs to be done, and while I encourage pushback against these sorts of comments or ill-conceived policy proposals, it's important not to get too carried away and lose sight of the big picture. I would agree with that. Don't get carried away. No one's throwing Trump off the boat. But the illegal migrants are not the ones that are competing with our college graduates for entry-level white-collar jobs, right? Those are the legal migrants, the H-1Bs. That's why their presence is so particularly painful. Wall Street Mass says deport 30 million illegal aliens, send the H-1B visa and their H-4 visa family members back to their home countries. Housing prices and apartment rental prices will become affordable instantly. We would free up tens of millions of units of housing. And of course, American wages would increase. Yep, I think that is the correct answer. Upstate Federalist writes, Republicans are totally clueless to the anger over the H-1B issue. Yeah, it feels like a betrayal. Like we have Mexicans taking trade jobs and Indians taking white-collar jobs. And Trump comes out and says, we need 1 million more Chinese people per year in college. Actually, he's saying the same 600,000 we have in college already, but I get the point. The F are Americans left with. Yeah, that's the emotional response. Look at this. Prepare for every American town to look like this, flooded with H-1B invaders. This, of course, is a Costco. Trump's H-1B scam betrays us all, handing jobs to foreigners while erasing the people who built this nation. The great replacement is here. I've had this experience. Have you had this experience at your local Costco, your local IKEA? It's awash in foreigners, often speaking foreign languages, not assimilated American citizens. The great and powerful Savannah Hernandez, big fan of hers, she says, this week has made me realize the true impact of Charlie's voice behind the scenes. He would often privately push the administration away from policies that he knew would have a negative impact on the country. Without him, the administration is completely out of touch. And then she gets a critique, someone calling her a panican, a Republican in panic. But Trump made these statements, folks. This is not some misrepresentation by the left-wing media. I shared with you earlier the Kristi Noem interview where she says, oh, we're producing more and more third world naturalized citizens in the U.S., and we don't want that. Processing H-1B visas and green cards at the fastest pace ever during a once-in-a-100-year hiring collapse. Insane. Countries fail from within. Boston Mom, I thought this was interesting. I used to live in Massachusetts. She's from Massachusetts. She writes, a few weeks back, I was at a hockey event for my son, and one of the parents, who I really like, was discussing with another parent the H-1B visas and how his colleagues in tech who are in their mid-40s with families are being laid off. These are the Americans, are being laid off and replaced by cheap foreign labor, mostly from India. Let's just say they didn't have nice things to say about the people replacing them, including how much nepotism happens once certain groups, Indians, get into positions of power. These are people that vote Democrat. The Americans she overheard are people that vote Democrat, are in Massachusetts, and they were not holding back the resentment over H-1Bs and the Indians. This is not to single out one country. Well, we may as well. 80% of the H-1Bs are Indians, but that's the one they mentioned. I just can't help but wonder why these countries with so much amazing talent are not themselves functional societies. If Indians are so awesome, why does India look like India? And how did we, America, survive without the mass immigration? Want to radicalize normies? Keep this H-1B nonsense up. It's such a self-goal of the right to ever suggest anything that could be interpreted as prioritizing H-1B over American citizens. It's hard to imagine what led Trump to doing this, except I suspect he's really thinking about that very top echelon on a transient basis. Patrick Casey, if you want to understand what the Trump administration is doing on immigration, just read liberal sources. They will tell you the truth. We're in the early stages of one of the largest immigration crackdowns in U.S. history. Thanks to Trump, America is experiencing net negative migration for the first time since the 60s. Whatever you do, don't read right-wing Twitter. He would probably call them panicans, where you'll see claims that Trump's massively increasing immigration, where people base their understanding of the admin on a few comments in an interview. Well, they were Trump's comments, my friend, instead of the facts policy. Why would there be a disconnect between Trump's facts and policy and Trump's statements in an interview? The average New York Times reader understands that we're experiencing net negative migration for the first time in decades. The average right-wing Twitter user doesn't think it's happening no matter what the data says. Okay, but none of that negates what Trump actually said in that interview.
Republicans have to talk about it.
And does that mean the H-1B visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration? Because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent.
So he agrees we should not flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of H-1Bs, right? When you parse this language, I think we can see where Trump's coming from, but the emotional impact was so poor. So she says you can't bring in hundreds of thousands, and Trump says, I agree, but you need specialists, basically is what's happening.
You can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands
I agree,
of foreign
but
workers.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
Well, we
a
have
country
plenty of talented people
no,
here.
you don't. No, you don't.
We don't have
We have plenty of talent. No, you don't, Trump responds. No, you don't. And this is being interpreted as Trump saying that America is talentless. I think if you asked him, he would say, well, we don't have talent in these specific areas. But it's his job to communicate this.
talented people
no,
here.
you don't have certain talents, and
Certain talents.
people have to learn. You can't take people.
And people have to learn. Well, we don't have the talents. Americans need to be educated in those talents.
People off an unemployment, like an unemployment line, and say, "I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles," or "I'm going to put."
How did we ever do it before?
Now, Trump, you know, he's not a policy technician. He's throwing out missiles as something that's complicated to do, that we've lost the skill set for, that we need to reacquire. He doesn't know that H-1Bs probably wouldn't be permitted for security reasons to work on missiles. But you understand the point he's trying to make here.